All right, good morning. We'll get started.
Morning. We have a bigger crowd than usual for today for Finance Committee meeting. I know we've been sending around. We've been for folks that are here and for folks watching online, just that may be new to the Finance Committee piece and don't always attend these. There's no voting for anything here. Typically, we're signing the warrant for the week's bills. We oftentimes do a lot of deep dives into the budget and financial tracking for the organization. Last Friday, we called Big Finance Friday or Freaky Friday, where we do a look back on the previous month or the previous quarter's budgeting to really dial in where we are at as an organization. But we also have started to blend in some more larger financial policy discussions today, which is paid parking for seasonal kiosks in Ellsworth. One of the reasons that we're doing that is, I know, and this part of the budget cycle, it became pretty clear, which was a big focus of this committee and others before, that, and I think, Steve, you mentioned at the forum, that Ellsworth's needs are bigger than its means in many ways. We cut the budget to what we thought was as appropriate as possible, but that left a lot of investment on the table that we still need to do. There's alternative ways that we're looking at it, especially towards next budget season. I'm trying to figure out additional ways that we can reduce the burden on the taxpayers here in Ellsworth. I call Ellsworth the biggest little city in Maine. It's literally the biggest at 97.3 square miles, but around 9,000 people. And that creates enormous infrastructure challenges on its own, just with a landmass that large. But then you add 4 million people coming to Acadia National Park every year, millions more. Summer folks going to down East Maine. Folks like myself who live in Castine who have to come here pretty often to either work or on the weekends to go to Walmart or the Home Depot or go to the Grand for a Little Mermaid theater with the kids and use the infrastructure here. Or if you live in Machias, Maine, similar things. That's like another, only 9,000 people here, but really the service center for 80,000 people in Hancock and Washington counties, landmass twice the size of Rhode Island. So I've really noticed that it creates very unique pressures on this city that a lot of others don't. And so how do we really do due diligence in the anticipation of next year's budget cycle, which had a big property tax increase, on things we can do that won't burden the Ellsworth taxpayers and could potentially drive revenues for investment. So in addition to paid parking, we're also considering some short-term rental regulation, which has been discussed in council before. Another issue where I feel we'll probably have a packed room for discussion on, and also this is an area for discussion and data and the pros and the cons and for really kind of kicking the tires on these very complex issues that could help drive revenue but also could help or hurt and change the character of the city. And they deserve a lot of attention, a lot of analysis, and for the council, I know we've talked about this at previous Finance Committee meetings, and I'd say there's been some councilors who have tepid support for this idea and want more data. And there's some councilors who have tepid, they're in opposition to this issue, but they want more data, and they want to see so this is kind of the first piece on more data. There's no decision for this conversation, but we'll show you kind of what we're at, and Sean's going to lead a presentation. He's our Deputy Police Chief, Sean Willey. In addition to being an excellent Deputy Police Chief, he's an excellent budgeter. I think the finance team will validate that if we change one tiny thing, there's a small change. Yeah, Sean will be in your office in 45 minutes. I don't know if he has some special alerting system in there. He's got a great head for numbers, and the police previously, when they were doing parking enforcement, and I guess, I don't know, when there was meters in Ellsworth previously, I don't know if the police handled that as well, but that was the previous area where this fell under. So Sean's been doing a great job in his presentation, and I'll send it over to him.
I do want to just add, this is kind of like an introductory type of thing for the public. We will be having additional meetings on this. I'm assuming we'll end up having a workshop, because I know there have been some concerns that it was just something that the finance committee was going to vote on, but the finance committee doesn't vote on anything. We just gather the information and start asking questions to think about how the rest of the council is going to, or what questions they're gonna ask. So this is just the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah. If we wanted to move forward or with some version or full parking kiosks, one area as a test pilot, and there's or nothing. All those are options, and I think they'll come to what the best decision here would be through multiple workshops, especially with our downtown business owners, who I think could be most affected by this, to make sure. Now, I know they don't necessarily speak as one. No large body of people do, but really next steps want to dive deeper with them. So,
Good morning. So we'll get started here. This first slide shows our current parking areas that are highlighted in yellow. We have roughly 461 parking spots in the city.
Can we turn that so maybe everyone can kind of see it? Can you,
Good?
I was gonna say, I can put it on here and we can all look at
I can see
it.
it.
You can see, can you see?
Everybody good?
Okay.
Good?
Going
All right.
forward, yeah.
All right, so we have roughly 461 parking spots in the city, and that number is actually down a little bit with the parklet area, and then some spots on School Street that have disappeared, along with Pine Street. They haven't been marked for years, and then some on Franklin. So we have a few more than 461, but they're not currently marked in the city. And so Charlie's going to kind of open up with how could seasonal downtown kiosks affect Ellsworth?
yeah, so there's a variety of things, and this is not a comprehensive list, but I think one of the things I've noticed here, we all notice, is that especially in some of our peak times, parking is an issue especially on that Main Street area. I mean, not just the parking, but the whole place becomes a parking lot. And there's traffic issues we got to worry about, and the growth here. And when we first talked about this at a finance committee a couple months ago, and so I was like, all right, well, let me talk to some business owners downtown, and I was kind of expecting just hard pass. We don't this, and a lot of them saying actually I would potentially, like, one of the issues that would help with was access and turnover. A lot of times I feel like the spots there that people park, and they they're there for a good portion of the day, and it doesn't create enough space for customers to visit my restaurant or my shop, and I was like, oh, interesting. They also said that, are you prepared for the heat if you discuss this conversation? Because a lot of people don't have that same opinion. So there is, I think, and especially doing a little more research on that now, this is often the time when these discussions start happening in cities and towns, both in Maine, but across America. I know Bar Harbor is the big one that folks are talking about and seeing the big money that's coming out of there, but Camden and Rockland also recently went to parking kiosks in their lots, and now I think they're doing actually their streets shortly thereafter, their main areas. So when places kind of get to that level where you're almost full, or you're full, and that oftentimes inspires us. So this could create better turnover in some of those high frequency areas. Income as well. That's another piece of this, to bring in income from non-residents to offset city budgets, bonds, and especially over a multiple year time frame, and Sean will get in more of the details here. That's potential millions in dollars that can be spent. They just opened the rules up on infrastructure, on capital investments, reduction in property rates, downtown investment, especially, which I think would be that we'd offer vouchers for Ellsworth residents, potentially, preferred customers, folks at the churches when they have, so that their Sunday parking is free. So a way to seasonally, acquire some investment that's not, that people are using the infrastructure around here that aren't necessarily paying for the infrastructure. So Enforcement's another piece. I think it was during the pandemic, the decision was made to not do parking enforcement in Ellsworth anymore, and we still don't do parking enforcement here. That obviously can relate to the access issue, but to reinstitute that is going to be a cost. It would be a cost that would be borne on the Ellsworth, the 9,000 taxpayers, so we'd be able to really get back to parking enforcement and have a mechanism. Now, there is some offset to the tickets themselves, but I think as you talked about, Tammy, even when you were here, when they were doing parking enforcement, the tickets don't cover the price of enforcement. So there's still going to be a delta, even if we re-implemented parking enforcement without doing kiosks that we'd have, which is a separate piece that maybe we need to consider, regardless of kiosks going forward or not. We're getting to that level where I think that really should be considered. Data as well. I think we have a 2007 study on our parking. 2008, which really kind of proposed paid parking then, noted that we were almost full then. But this will really allow us to better understand how residents and visitors use our parking structures. Right now, we have no policies for permit parking for employees, so oftentimes employees are likely, from businesses, from city halls, from others, are utilizing spaces in ways that maybe could be reconfigured so that that we're keeping prime spaces open for customers, for the businesses, and really getting a little more dialed into how many employees use the parking around here, and creating permits for them to go in specific slots that we keep. Especially when there's such pressures on the system, we keep as much parking available for customers to come here as possible. And then there are also some significant drawbacks, and that really need to be weighed against the pros here as well. This is not an exhaustive list, but risk to the character of downtown Ellsworth. I know I've heard that from a bunch of folks, including business owners, that this, like, one of the special things about Ellsworth is that, especially considering Camden and Rockland and Bar Harbor are using paid parking, is like we're a freed parking area. That's a service, again, paid for through the residents here, but that also draws people here. It has more of a and even just the kiosks themselves sort of represent a different type of Ellsworth. Also, the potential to drive customers out of the Main Street area to non-paid parking areas is a concern I've seen a few times, and also hassles for residents and for others visiting here, having to actually use the kiosks, and that's just another piece of your day that comes out. Before I send it to Sean to go through the rest of the proposal, and I did want to mention Gretchen Wilson, who's the former Chamber of Commerce director. She emailed me in opposition to this, and I thought it was a good letter. She said she couldn't be here today, but on that piece, I'll just read it so you can kind of hear. I thought it was a good summation of some of the opposition to the idea. But she said, "Hello, it was brought to my attention that the city of Ellsworth is considering parking meters for the downtown area. As a former director of the Ellsworth Chamber, and a resident and part-time employee at Elizabeth's on Main Street, I would like to express my disapproval for this project. For over 10 years now, the heart of the Ellsworth Chamber, Heart of Ellsworth, and the city's Economic Development Department have worked to bring our Main Street to the thriving and full business, dining, and entertainment center it is today. When I took the director's position at the Chamber 8 years ago, not only for the former Grasshopper Shop building empty, but locations in the Lucchini Building, the lower Main Street locations, the space next door to the Grand, longtime restaurant, the Mex was for sale, the J&B Atlantic Building was empty and looking for businesses to fill several large spaces, and State Street had empty storefronts all along it. All of these spaces are full, with thriving retail and dining options, businesses that stayed open the course through the trials of opening, a global pandemic, weather issues, and more, have at least 5+ years on Main Street. As I mentioned, this did not happen overnight. Considerable time was spent talking to businesses outside of Ellsworth who might consider a location on Main Street, talking with rental rates. Possible assistance with refurbish or repair issues also was part of the discussions many of us had to fill these empty storefronts. The variety of unique businesses that now thrive on Main Street is part of what makes a wonderful day for visitors, families, and locals. Add to that the Parklet, which provides a place to relax, eat, wait for a table, or host a meeting. Downtown Ellsworth is known far and wide as a place to spend an evening, a dinner and a drink, an event at the Grand, or a day Christmas shopping. Finally, the fact that we have considerable parking that is free to all is a big reason our businesses thrive on Main Street. As a part-time employee at Elizabeth's for almost 2 years, I have spent my mornings greeting customers who come here for exactly the reasons I have stated. They are discouraged with Bar Harbor's parking problems, paying for parking, and the crazy busy streets as cars loop the town trying to find somewhere to park, walk, shop, and dine. Over the past 2 years, Elizabeth's business has grown to a wide audience around Maine. The shop is known for upscale clothing for women, especially for weddings and events. Retail locations for this customer don't exist in many areas. We attract customers from Bangor, Hancock, and Washington counties and southern Maine. Repeat customers from away are common. Stores that are similar in the area are only seasonal. Others, very successful downtowns, including Bangor, Belfast, and Camden, do not have paid parking. Providing options for locals that are not seasonal is what downtown Ellsworth is all about. Locals work, live, shop, and eat in our downtown. They also pay double-digit mill rates compared to surrounding towns. All this looks like to them is yet another city tax. Thank you for taking the time to consider keeping parking in downtown as it is. More signage for other parking lots near Main Street would be helpful as well. We have a unique attraction that as our Main Street, it has taken a lot to get here. Let's continue to welcome visitors and locals alike by making parking simple and free. So I did want to, we mentioned some of the pros, but there are some cons, and I think that's, as a council, as a community, that's, pretty central for me too, and for Sean, who's also an Ellsworth resident, is, that this is an amazing success story here in this Main Street, and keeping that and not having this jeopardize that, I think it should be under consideration. But with that, I'll let Sean go through the proposal.
All right, so in 2008, the city did a parking study, which I think we're going to make available online for people to be able to review. But some highlights of it in the study. It said we needed an additional 125 spaces by 2018. From the study that was done, they figured that the occupancy rate during non-peak demand time was 65% in the downtown area, and then 77% at peak time. They also talked pretty heavily about developing a downtown parking district to utilize paid parking in the study. And it didn't get into fees and things like that, but it did talk about maybe organizing a group with the downtown business to get their input and work with the council to be able to come up with a plan for paid parking. And then the really other big thing it talks about, and this probably dealt with 125 additional spaces, it talks about being able to use funds to develop a parking deck on the Water Street parking lot the city owns. If the capacity surpasses 80%, and as you can see, they were 65 and 77% back in 2008. So there was some talk about, some type of parking garage to add additional spaces to the city. So kind of just the draft, working with a company that does parking throughout the state of Maine. Charlie talked about Bar Harbor, but we also looked at Camden, Belfast, Rockland, and Bangor. Some of them use the same company, some of them don't. Bangor actually contracts out, and they're bringing in roughly $1 million in revenue after they've contracted out. They have paid parking in garages. They have paid parking on streets. In front of their library, there's a kiosk where you pay 50 cents to park in front of the library. And then there's several parking lots in the city that are kiosks, along with their downtown is a 2-hour parking, but it's all monitored with by license plate readers, marking the cars electronically, and then issuing summonses for people that are over the time. So there are some things in play in all those cities as far as parking enforcement. So working with the company, driving around, we have roughly, like I said, 461 spots available, give or take. So we would look at purchasing 20 MS3 solar kiosks. They're a heavy device. They'd be brought in during winter times, and they take a credit card. There's a keypad on them, and they also are able to be used through what's called a text-to-pay or a mobile app. So you don't have to use the kiosk. You have a couple other options to be able to pay for your parking. The company also offers a extensive permit management software. We'll get into that a little bit more, but there's no more stickers, everything's by license plate. If we went this route, we would have a link on our website that you would be able to go on to, and residents would be able to put in their license plate number, and it would be verified, and then we could set up however many free vouchers we wanted to give them to be able to park, or we can set up permit parking for, other types of things, and we'll get into that list here in a little bit. And so it also covers the enforcement tools. Like I said, everything is licensed by license plate. So we would have what's called an LPR on a vehicle. It monitors the license plate. It tells you if somebody hasn't paid so that there can be enforcement done. And we also would be doing that through cell phones. The software allows you to punch in the first 3 digits of a plate, and then it tells you whether the person's paid or not, and where to go from there. So basically, the total startup cost was about $192,000. And then we have some yearly associated costs, and those include kiosk software fees, the permit parking software fees, resident voucher software fees, the software that runs the LPRs, staffing, the vehicle, and equipment for the enforcement was estimated at about $145,000 yearly. Kind of the idea is initially it would be overseen by the police department. Funds are received and managed by the finance department with the assistance from the parking people. They take care of all the late delinquent fines that people don't pay. They do all that, so it wouldn't be a burden on the finance department. The finance department would just be receiving the money and reallocating it to wherever it was decided. And then Charlie talked a little bit, but the law used to be very specific on what you could use the funds for, and now they've really broadened that, so we could pretty much use the funds for anything that would help benefit the taxpayers in the downtown area or things like that. So kind of the recommendation, looking through all the other areas in our area, we would do paid parking from May 1 to October 31, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Sundays, because of church and things like that, we would start from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we would start at $2 per hour, a max of 4 hours at any space in the city that was actually just paid parking. And we'll get into, there's going to be some spots that are paid parking and permit parking. So, some questions came up that Charlie and I received about handicap parking. State law provides there are no fees for handicap plates or placards anywhere in the state. They can park for free. So it goes back to the permitting software. These are all things that we can do with the permitting software. Resident permits, vouchers, discounts, free. It's all based on who wants to put their information in the system, their plate number, to be able to get whatever the council, the parking committee, if there was one, decided we would charge residents. Same thing for business employee permits. They would be able to, any employee that works at one of the businesses downtown would be able to put their plate numbers in the system, and they would have certain places around the city that they could park. Basically, not the high visibility spots where we would want turnover, so we'd have some selected areas for permit parking, so that the businesses can have the turnover to be able to have more clientele come in. And then we looked at non-resident taxpayer permits. So people that own businesses would still be able to apply if they didn't live in the city of Ellsworth, because they do pay taxes here, and be able to receive some type of voucher discount for their vehicles as well. There's commercial fishing permits. Those would be used down at the pier, Elver fishermen, whatever type of fishing is going on down there. So we would be able to monitor that. Municipal employee permits, obviously for City Hall people. And then it would not allow them to be able to come park for free when they're not working. There would be certain areas, and the LPR system is very GPS based, so you're able to set parameters on it so you know where certain vehicles can be and can't be, like the employees would have a certain area, so they wouldn't be able to go park on Main Street on their day off and get free parking. And we have bed and breakfast and Airbnb permits. Those are usually sold for the 6-month period of the parking. Boater permits, contractor permits, special events. Keep going into detail on those, but those are, I mean, it's just all parameters that you can set, that other communities have set, where they allowed minimal fees. Sometimes the contractor fees I saw in some of them were whatever the day's parking would be. If they were taking up that spot, that was their fee for the day. And the permit was good for, you know, that day, and then they could keep renewing it if they wanted. So this slide just shows some revenue projections. I received this from the company. We've adjusted it a little bit, but it's the basic projections they've used for the other communities around us. It's a low number compared to what other communities have saw in revenue. But, so we figured on 400 spaces, and on the top part, you can see if our occupancy was 30% for the year, it would be a revenue of $483,000. Kind of goes up 40, 50, 60. And if if we were 80% full occupancy throughout the May 1 to October 31, it would be $1.29 million in revenue. The bottom half, I kind of changed it up based on some of the 2008 study. And so for May, we're at 55%, June we're at 60, July, August, and September we're at 70, and then back in October we're at 55. And that brings in just a little over $1 million in revenue. This is not figuring in any of the permit parking fees we might have for things. This is just what people would be putting in paid parking through the kiosk, the app, or the text-to-pay.
This doesn't include the cost of the cost, right?
No, this is just revenue, so you would minus the annual cost out of that. Yep. Preliminary downtown map, blue would be paid parking areas, so you'd have to use the kiosk, the app, or the text-to-pay. Red is permit parking areas, and we'd have to develop some areas in here that were both probably paid and permit combined, so that we would have some more areas. Where you see the dollar signs is where we put kiosks. Like I said, we had estimated with the company that came and looked at us, 20 kiosks. We have 15 of them listed on there, so we have 4 more to be able to put somewhere, and then we would have 1 as a spare. So that's kind of still a work in progress with some more discussion with some people.
I should note, this is if you did all of the spots, these are like our total assets that have that you could do, a pilot on a much smaller section. Also, after a lot of conversation, we don't know the full staff capacity. We might need, double or triple. We might need less of the red permit parking to accommodate our staff piece, which is the other part of this is just the data collection for really to think of our infrastructure assets more strategically. How we do that. I think there's also some of this which isn't even quite known as public parking, places that the city owns, but isn't even lined right now as public kind of parking areas. So this is not the plan. It's just this is a concept of if you're doing, from a high level view, as much paid seasonal kiosk parking with what could be expected to be permit parking as well. But all of those reds and blues could change around depending on feedback from folks.
I have a question. So you download the app potentially. Does that app tell you where available parking is? Is it that?
It's a Park mobile app. It's used through all New England.
Mm-hmm.
quite honestly, I don't know if it has that feature to tell you where available parking is. My guess is it does.
Yeah, because I imagine if people are used to using it, that if it does say that, that would increase the efficiency of people finding parking.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's also like the way modern technology is used, you know, I know they used to previously, they'd mark tires and kind of have, now it's these license plate readers, they just, you know, you can just walk through it, captures the data, knows when to go out.
Or at the very least, it would show a map of here's all the, you know, basically you see that map and go, oh, I can go over one street over and there's this parking lot that I didn't know was there.
Yeah, it's one of the things I hear a lot from business owners is signage, you know, waypoint finding, which you see other cities and towns. It's just much easier to drive in there and see. And I should also note that Jana and Matt are doing, you know, incredible work on grants and Village Partnership Initiative and Thriving Communities piece that, you know, will also help on the signage front and other things. They are a few years out on kind of funding some of those pieces. But, you know, I don't want to just tie like signage or any like one piece to here and like this, the only way to do it is through the paid parking. But this would kind of, in a very much quicker time frame, you know, help with all of those pieces. Is, you know, redo the signs that have been out there and haven't really been updated in probably decades now, and then reanalyze our parking, how our flows are going to make those spots more available and visible.
Yeah, when I left out about signage, that was in the initial 192,000. I want to say close to $20,000 was set aside for signage, and kind of the thought process would be obviously for the paid parking, but it would also, we would want to assist any businesses that had private parking with their signage to make sure that it was properly marked for them as well, so that people weren't taking up their private spots. So we did factor that in there to try to help them all out with their actually own parking spots, so we would make sure that people weren't taking those up. This should, go ahead.
No, I don't want to cut anybody short whatsoever, but I just wanted to throw out that it's good to see this many people at the finance meeting, and we usually run about an hour, and there's a lot of people here, and I'd like to hear from everybody here, you know, yay, nay. I mean, we could talk all day about this, and I don't want to cut anybody short, but usually this runs about an hour. If people have more time, that's fine, but there's a lot of people here, and I want to make sure everybody's heard.
Yep, we're close.
Okay.
And we have some hard deadlines, I know, for council and staff too, that we have to
Okay.
be out.
All right, so I just
Yep.
want to make sure everyone got a chance to just throw out the yay or nay from the audience, if they want to speak. Maybe it's just informative. I don't want to cut anybody short, is
Sure.
my point.
Absolutely.
So the harbor is another option. I'll just keep moving right along. And then Charlie's going to kind of finish up with what we can spend any revenue on.
Yeah, that's one of the big questions is, you know, how would the money be spent? You know, and in some ways that's, you know, if we were to move forward, that's a discussion with council, and ultimately their decision. You could put it all back into property tax reduction. You know, having talked to folks, if we were to go this route, you know, I think the downtown business owners would, you know, who have, in some ways I consider this their parking. And a significant portion of that, I would anticipate going towards, you know, some sort of committee, you know, of the downtown organization in a process where they, you know, that they would have input into how the money would be spent for beautification, for investments in the parklet, for investments in, if they feel like additional parking infrastructure is needed to, you know, to accommodate more visitors and customers, that this would be a funding mechanism for them, so that a significant portion of any funds generated would be reinvested back into the downtown areas, and would really, in ways now, like we don't have large line items outside of, you know, future grant funding to invest in the downtowns. This really could be that way in the very near term. if, let's say you take 600,000 as, an income level, you could also consider that as like a debt service, and bond for, $5 million over a certain amount of time, and then that would be this commission's sort of pot of money over the next X years, to invest and to kind of, so that the other piece is infrastructure. I feel, it is allowed for public access roadways to be invested in. It's no secret that the city of Ellsworth over the last 5 or 6 years, has really, disinvested in their, in the infrastructure for roads around here. We are talking about a bond cycle for that at future meetings. If you're interested in this, next week, we're also going to be talking about, roads and some other infrastructure pieces, which is, as we talked about in the last budget cycle, was something we took off the budget cycle because there's such a big backlog of road investment needed that to put, multiple millions of dollars on 1 year's, tax rate is just not responsible. And many other cities and towns do this, where you have a larger, you have a bond cycle where we'll start doing that. So this could help mitigate some of those infrastructure costs, either through bonding or in the near term as well. And that, but ultimately it would be the decision of both the business community and the council, should we move forward with this, but we have a lot more work to do on what that process would be for those investments. But, if this was $100,000, I probably wouldn't be here, but this is, especially even with carve-outs for Ellsworth residents and vouchers for, loyal customers, this would be a significant revenue stream that could, get to what you were talking about, Steve, at the last forum on, without Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth having to foot the bill for a lot of these investments that are necessary but are beyond the means of the taxpayer. That's not the only way. We're going to be chasing grants. Again, this is one piece of a lot of things that I'm trying to do with the finance team before we get to budget season, which is the Ellsworth taxpayer side of things, on how we can kind of reduce that burden. So there's other ways we're looking at too, but that this is a big one.
All right. So we're-
This is very informative and well put together. Thank you both.
So we'd love to hear from the public.
And if you could come to the microphone if you're comfortable, that way the folks watching online can also hear.
Absolutely.
All right. Hi, my name is Suzanne Wood. I am a business owner, a property owner. I own Close Encounter thrift shop on Water Street. I'm going to keep this simple and short. I could get behind this if we had public bathrooms.
Oh, interesting.
I could get behind this if we had proper signs that we've been asking for, begging for years. I've watched Ellsworth.
You mean parking signs? Sorry.
Excuse me?
You mean parking signs?
Signs in general, just signs pointing to downtown. People drive by downtown, going through High Street, and they don't even know that we're here. And we've just been begging and begging and begging for signs. How much does a sign cost? Probably not $192,000.
I think Sean had that. What was it, Sean?
It set aside $20,000 in there for signage.
Right, but I just mean signage in general, just
Yep.
signage in general. But bathrooms, like, if you have to pee, you're not going to stop and pay for parking.
And that's a much bigger
You're
one.
just not.
Yeah, that's like
You're
the
not.
350,000. I was looking at the ones that Bangor just put in, although they had to send them back, I guess, because they weren't.
And
right.
I know that bathroom facilities cost a lot of money, but like, if we could just start with porta potties, I'd settle for a porta potty. People do it in Belfast. Why can't we do it here? So I can tell you that every single one of these business owners agree with me on the bathroom thing. I'm just going to speak for all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm shaking because I don't like to do this, but I think that we could all come to an agreement on stuff like this and come to some sort of, agreement that, yeah, it would be great to get $1 million from this, and I'm sure there's many things that could come from this, but we have to have other things first. And That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm
And that was 100% for every business owner thinks Suze was right. She could speak for all of them. The public bathrooms is a big one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Molly Harding. I own Morton's Moo on 9 School Street. I 100% agree with her with the bathroom and the signage issue. But one thing I hadn't heard mentioned, and looking at the signs, is safety of the employees. One of my big concerns, employing young people, is at night, they leave, it's after dark. Every single night, I watch them get into their cars. The map that we saw, I understand it could change, but the map that we saw doesn't leave any permitted parking within my visual sight of my business. So I would ask that if this were to happen, every downtown business would have permitted parking close to the business. It would have to be well-lit, close to the business, and safety be a major concern, because understand that it's the employees, it's the young people who are going to be walking around at night getting to their cars. So that's my main concern after seeing this presentation.
It's really interesting.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not, I think I was thinking about it before, like, you want to push your employees as far away to keep those, but for a lot of folks,
Yep.
for safety, you want to keep, that would have to be considered in the mapping.
Thank you.
Really good.
Anyone else? Thank you.
My name's Lori Chase. I own Coastal Interiors, and as I've been told, I am one of the 1%ers because I have parking. I have a lot of parking. I have big trucks, I have little trucks, and I have extremely well-marked private parking. Coastal Interiors only. I could be out there all day with a baseball bat, and still, people would be parking in my parking lot and taking up spaces, and then my semis have to go around the block, come back, park at the Jordan parking lot, who also has parking, and come through, because I have just random people parking all the time. So if it's paid parking and it's my parking lot, I'm gonna have to put barbed wire up, that would be the only way to keep people out. And I don't think it's fair to the downtown businesses and the employees to, like, this permitted thing in the red, and it's safety, but it's also convenience. You're leaving in the winter, you want to trudge 15 minutes, 20 minutes through the snow to go home or come to work? No, they should be able to park anywhere, like maybe block off the main part of Main Street. But I think this is just a really bad idea for a downtown that's trying to come back. And you can't even get out through Water Street already because the traffic is so bad. Because the light is screwed up, it lets 3 people out, period. So it's just backed up for miles already. So I think it's bad idea. There's money elsewhere, there's money to be had through savings. This is not a good revenue stream for the city of Ellsworth downtown.
Thank you.
Sean, can you remind us, per winter, did it say October 15th, 31st?
Yeah, it was May 1 to October 31, and then
Okay,
just
so
when she was talking about her parking lot and maybe more people using that, because she could work with the city and for enforcement purposes for her parking spots. If the owners of land were willing to do that, there are mechanisms in place with this software and programming that we would be able to assist them to make sure people were not using their private parking spots.
Interesting. So you could almost analyze the private lots. I'm sure there'd have to be a cost share to ticket it, and that maybe those funds could go to that, if that happens, that it could actually go.
So there are some things in place, along with signage that I would think we would provide to owners that would allow them to tow vehicles if they were illegally parked. That's a common thing as well.
It is interesting. I think we talked about the dates, and of course, those could change. It could be a smaller window when it's just super maxed out here, but I think we've all been pretty surprised of how late the seasons are going for tourism these days with traffic. And, I know there's been a few news articles on this, that the season is extending, and folks are not just coming up here from that typical summer season. They're making it all the way through October now.
Hello, Tabitha White, resident. I just wanted to speak on behalf of blue-collar workers of Ellsworth and Hancock County, which a lot frequent our downtown businesses. They actually tend to come right off of Water Street and park and hang out downtown while traffic is really bad. They're already at a lower income status, so to put that pressure of parking fees on our Hancock County residents, I think is unfair. I also noticed that you were suggesting, I'm not sure if it was a suggestion or if you were just showing that this was what other towns were doing, but the 8 to 8. I think 8 p.m. is kind of a stretch there if we were going to do parking, as most of the downtown area has cleared out after 5 p.m. So I think you could shorten that. And having lived in New York City and Boston, I never had to pay for parking on Sundays, ever. So that should definitely be looked at as well. I would be furious to have to do that here. I think that's what I have. I also think that it would be really wise to do this on a small scale first and see how it goes. We're looking at data from 2008, and I'm sure that if we did this study again, we would show that we really have reached a fuller capacity, but that's proof that we've gotten there. So I think using this 2008 data shows that we haven't really done more research on it. So a little bit more research on that. And I think that taking our time on this would be good. There are going to be a lot of very upset residents, and I'm pushing out to Hancock County residents as well that frequent our downtown businesses and want to frequent our downtown businesses. So, thank you.
Hey, good morning. Dan Goldstein, chef, owner of Provener here on 112 Main Street. I made some notes. I'm just going to read from my notes, if you don't mind. I think my biggest fear for this, if you want to say fear, would be kind of perception, where metered parking can sometimes feel very city-like and kind of detract from the quaint atmosphere, relaxed atmosphere that we've been striving to maintain for all this time. And I think the perception of just another town trying to squeeze money from tourists and locals, just another negative public opinion. Sure, $1 million in revenue is great. I'm sure it could do wonders for the community, but I guess at what cost? So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. Greg Winston, co-owner of Morton's Moo Ice Cream in 9 School Street. Don't give away an advantage that Ellsworth has over Bar Harbor and other places right now. Seconding Darren's point that this is still just a place people can come in and stop. I don't think we'll see as many people stopping here anymore. I worry it'll be a major drag, if not the death knell of small businesses. They will not be able to compete with the corporate big box stores that have their own major parking spaces, parking lots at this point. And employee retention is another thing to think about. We've had a lot of our own employees return after working on the island and in part being discouraged by parking access and parking costs. I'm not sure if the permitting system would be much of an encouragement to them as well. It's still going to be really a cost on the pockets of blue-collar workers as well. So I hope you consider those points. I'm certainly willing to listen to some of the arguments and the revenue of customer turnover. I hadn't thought about that until this morning, that greater customer turnover could help some of the small businesses, but right now I'm a nay. I just see it as ultimately a bigger challenge to having people stop in Ellsworth in the first place. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm John Linehan, local businessman. I'm extremely interested in the finances here in the city of Ellsworth. And I'm running as a candidate for the city council this year because finances is my main concern, especially lower property taxes. I believe everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think this year we have an opportunity to put 2 leaders in office that can make a big difference financially in our city. So I recommend voting for Steve O'Halloran, the incumbent, because I've seen him at many of the meetings, and he's taken a stand for our finances in the right way for smaller government, lower property taxes. I recommend voting for myself for the other one, because I believe I'm an independent. I represent neither party. I'm neither Republican nor Democrat. I'm an independent. I represent we the people of Ellsworth, and I'm concerned about our finances. As Lori mentioned earlier, there's many ways we can reduce the finances, the expenses in the city of Ellsworth without doing such a things. And I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I think we the people should weigh in on it. But I think Ellsworth's financial situation right now needs to be getting a handle on our finances and our expenses. And so I'm here to represent we the people, and I hope the people rise up and make a difference financially in our city this year. Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions?
Nope.
Hugh Palcic from Zepp's Pizza, one of the owners of Zepp's Pizza. Just a question on this. Are we dealing with, is the issue that we're trying to solve, is there a public safety issue relative to this, or is this a revenue issue?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, again, what is the main driver? I think it could be both. I think having the public safety one, you know.
Because if it is public safety, I'd like to make sure that we're making data-driven decisions like we're seeing here. If it is public safety, I'd like to see some data that backs that up, if it is. But if it's just revenue, then if it is, then I think that this proposal should include a pro forma that shows the expenses next to that and long-term costs. Because I think that you're only seeing one side of this glass. You're really not getting the full picture. And it looks like $1 million in revenue, indeed it is, but that's not net. And I think that's something that Finance Committee should really consider.
Yeah, I think the few things. Yeah, I think next steps, and we can get to those too. Would really detailed breakdowns on those. On it kind of depends, right? If you want to go for $2 an hour, or $1 an hour. If you want to consider the whole kit and caboodle and then also breakdowns on what those. And Sean and I have talked about this already on just what those costs for enforcement are, because I think that's where the public safety aspect. I say, you know, a little bit of both, which is I think we probably need to start doing the parking enforcement. You know, could there be a little bit of a public safety of just having people walking around checking the cars, plus the lighting issue that was just brought up, like that. But that's could be separated from this as well, right? We could do those things plus the sign issue, which is brought up today. But then it gets me back to, you know, then I've got to start, and maybe I will. We'll start factoring that into the budget discussions for next year, and the parking kiosk could help mitigate those facts. So I'm hearing from you. You really want to see kind of these detailed breakdowns and full costs.
Well, I would think that you folks want that as well.
Yep.
I mean, I certainly would like to know that before making any decision one way or another on this. Myself, I have my concerns, but they're more questions now than anything else, because I think there's a lot of open-ended items here still. The pro forma would help greatly. In the presentation, and also it was mentioned that there's a company that you're working with. Have they been retained, or they're just an outside company right now?
They're just the ones that are doing the other ones in the area. So this is initial fact finding for it.
And there's multiple companies out there, obviously. Would you be proposing down the road an RFP for that?
Yep, definitely. RFP.
And that would be publicized?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That would be
I think
helpful.
that's required by the chart, but absolutely, yep.
And then lastly, if you do decide to go this route, and by the way, I echo the sentiments of all the folks that have been up here before me. But if we do go down this road, I really would like council to consider a parking benefit district specifically, and that's commonplace, especially when they go hand in hand with fee parking.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sure that monies are assigned to a specific direction from where the money was derived. So that's something that would be important. I think that would actually go a long way with a lot of folks here. maybe even solve some of the other concerns that were raised today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's the council's decision if they want to just do all lower property taxes or not do this at all. But I feel like that would have to be a central component and a process for that. How do we keep the money for the folks that will be most affected here? And what would you think that could exceed the potential downfalls if we were to move forward? And maybe the decision is we don't move forward because the downfalls are too high for some of the character issues that were mentioned.
And I guess a final footnote, it was mentioned that, trying to search for spots that may be open. And I'll make a pitch for a parking garage right there. Because there's actually, believe it or not, there's a study that has been done in New York City specific to that, on how many miles people travel collectively looking for spots versus having a central location where you could have parking. So it actually, you can go into the environmental concern, you can go into all that routine if you wish, but the facts actually call that out. So if there was this benefit district that I'm talking about, those funds could be seed money towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council questions?
I don't have a question one, I just want to thank everyone that's come here today, that's provided productive, feedback into what they're hearing. And to Charlie's point, we haven't made a decision. We're information gathering, and you are the folks that we want to hear from, among, many others. And, what I'm hearing there's concerns about the impacts of this, which are valid. There's also benefits. There are, bathrooms are, but then how do we pay for the bathrooms? Well, then maybe the parking pays for the bathrooms. And again, this is all just preliminary, but if we were to proceed, whatever we decide to do, ultimately, we want it to be a very well-informed decision. So I just welcome everyone's continued input, and, the staff, council, all are taking this very seriously. And so whatever decision we make, we'll make it together. And whether that's no parking, metering, I'm hearing things, signage seems to be a requirement regardless of how we proceed. I think that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the staff for preparing this so well, and we look forward to, continue this discussion.
John or Steve?
Good morning, Cara Romano, Director of Heart of Ellsworth. I didn't know if I had missed my spot, so that's why I raised my hand. But the one consideration that I didn't really hear, and I know that we're closing in on the comprehensive plan. I don't have a degree in community development or economic development or even in planning, but from all the research and the things I've learned over the years of being involved with Heart of Ellsworth and the main downtown center is that once the comp plan is sort of done and tied up, that there would be a recommendation typically in a comprehensive plan for one of the next steps being an updated downtown plan. And my understanding would be that this would be something that would be a very, very large part of that. And while we have a lot of demands that were discussed and recommendations from the businesses and the Chamber and Heart of Ellsworth that have over the years been recommended, signage, bathrooms, improved light poles, all of those sorts of things, wanting to make sure all of that ends up in there, but also there are other plans. And so what I'm a little bit concerned about is just that this is a component that isn't necessarily being considered in the larger picture of what is our downtown going to look like in 10 years and what are our goals collectively, not just as downtown building owners and business owners, but also as the larger community and also being a regional service center. So I just am hopeful that the entire council will consider next steps after the comp plan and where this fits into everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say the comp plan is in finalization this coming week, and the council will see the preliminary draft in November, at our November meeting, and then vote to ratify in December. But I can say that a lot of the suggestions from these folks out here, bathrooms, signage specifically wayfinding signage, public bathrooms, are key in the comp plan. It doesn't go into great detail about any sort of parking solutions or capacity building there, but those things are certainly there, which shows that not just the downtown business people, but the whole of Ellsworth are sort of pushing for those. I would be curious to see some data on what it looks like aside from kiosks, if we go for those other capacity building options like enforcing the 2-hour parking limit again, which we stopped pre-pandemic, adding those spaces back into Pine Street, which could just be striping and painting, and then wayfinding, specific parking wayfinding signage. How much capacity could that build? How much would that cost? We would have to probably bring somebody on to.
3 people, I think you have 3 part-timers is what they'd previously done, right?
No, just one. We brought in roughly $7,000 to $9,000 in revenue for those, when we were doing the 2-hour enforcement parking. I was looking back at some facts the other day on that.
I thought it was only 5 and we were paying a little over 5, so it wasn't even,
Yeah,
that's what I remember, but.
The end years were
We'll
somewhere in
definitely.
that, but I can
Yeah, I think it
get some
definitely
definite
would be.
numbers on
Yeah.
that. And we were paying one person for that position.
It was Monday through Friday,
Yes.
8 to 5,
Yeah.
if I remember.
Yeah, and I know I'm looking forward to the comp plan piece, plus and then how we layer that into, things that Matt and Jen are already working on that, that could free up a substantial portion of federal funds. It would still require some city match on go for it. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I can talk about that quickly. So, the comp plan definitely is like the overarching, but the business attraction plan also identified the visitation economy and sector as one of the bigger, greater business clusters, hospitality and visitation. And so there's recommendations in there for continuing to create what I call visitation assets or infrastructure for not only the downtown, but for High Street as well. And so we are working on those items through 2 larger grant opportunities, one being the Village Partnership Initiative, which is through the Maine DOT, specifically concentrating on the downtown. It's a study and a plan first, and so parking is actually one of the components of that plan that can be studied. If the council decides to move forward with kiosks or meter parking before that, then we would take that component out of the plan because you would get the data calculated through this. So it's more of like a pilot program to get the data collection rather than doing a study. So one way or another, excuse me, there would be data collected to be able to understand what the parking situation is. 2008 is a really long time ago. There's various different components. How much of that parking is actually employees right now versus visitors. I don't know if the details of that are in that 2008 study. These are things that could be studied through the Village Partnership Initiative study within the next 8 months, if we wanted it to be. All that said, it's a plan first. There'll be recommendations that come out of that plan, including fixing the lower light, Lori, including bike and pedestrian infrastructure to make our downtown more walkable from other places, which was another complaint that has been kind of focused on in some of the emails that we've gotten, that, until Ellsworth is a more walkable and bikeable place, people really can only rely on driving here. And so meters would deter them from driving. Basically, if they could walk or bike, that would be something that would be more amenable. So we'd be looking at that through the Village Partnership Initiative. Signage would come through the Village Partnership Initiative. Streetscape improvements in general. All that said, it's about a year study. They want to be able to evaluate our parking, our parking and our traffic in peak months. So that means we have to wait until spring or summer to be able to do those counts so that they're accurate, which then pushes the study off a little bit further. All that said, We have been told through working with the DOT that our project is estimated at somewhere around $30 million, of which they would go to bat to get federal funding for us through what's called the RISE program. It used to be called the Tiger Grant. The city would be on the hook to provide 10% of that. So we'd be looking at about $3.3 million to spend to a $30 million match. That would literally redo the entire downtown based on this study. And so it's a recommendation of the business attraction plan. It's within the comprehensive plan to redo a lot of the infrastructure of the downtown to make it a more prominent place for people to come shop, do business, all of that, make it more attractive. And so, you know, there is works in the plans to do all of this. Bathrooms was also identified in the business attraction plan because there was focus groups with downtown businesses. So all that said, we're working on a lot of this right now, but because it's in the planning stage now, that's usually about a year, and then you go for the grant funding about a year after that, and then, you know, you get into the competitive process, and then it's a year after that before there can actually be like shovels in the ground, let's just say. So it's about 3 years out that you're looking, and so it's my understanding that the parking meters would kind of fill in that gap. The revenue from the parking meters or kiosks would fill in that gap in the interim. And I just wanted to also say that there's about 7 emails in here that from individuals that were not able to make it today, and I will be sure that Charlie gets a copy, Sean gets a copy, and I would assume the entire council as well.
Yeah, I would like to see like the emails and from.
Absolutely, we'll gather that. I know the chamber, PJ and Cara also did some meetings on this, and they had some great feedback that they've already consolidated, so we'll gather that. I think next steps, I know we're running time here, but you know, Sean, Jana, myself, others will kind of, maybe Cara and PJ can really kind of circle up to take a temperature of where we're at. I really want to start talking to business owners more methodically on like all of the business owners on downtown and getting all of their thoughts. And I think that's the kind of crux of it was Jenna was you know, how much are we willing to wait, you know, 3-4 years, and what are those pieces? Maybe it's those signages, maybe it's a little bit more light, and what that cost figure. Maybe it's more bathrooms, maybe it's those that are just we can't wait X years for that, and that this could be a funding mechanism for it, or we need to put it on the taxpayer, or you know, in a year and raise taxes for it, or a mix of those two and a pilot. I mean, this is going to be you know, we have to layer in a lot of things, long-term planning, short-term, how do you fund it? It gets back to that biggest little city in Maine. There's a lot of pressures here, but also a lot of great people working on the difficult issues. And this isn't, to a few people's point, this isn't the only way. It's not this or nothing. There's other grants, you know, that we can look at that could be on a more short-term basis. You know, there's bonding capacity that spreads it out over a long period of time if we really needed to invest something that we thought was critical, but we didn't want to do a year one. So this is just one piece of a larger strategy to keep looking at, not just the taxes on the citizens of Ellsworth, but other strategies we can use to reduce impact here. So, thank you.
I have one quick question, and I don't know that anyone has the answer, but I'm interested to know what drove the city in '07 to order this '08 study, or maybe it was an '08 that drove this study, and it's been 16 years, and it seems like the study got shelved. And I'm wondering what the driving factor back then was, if anyone knows.
I do, sort of. So 2004 was the last comprehensive plan. In that comprehensive plan, there was a very large list of to-dos for ordinance changes as it pertained to the land use ordinance, which is Chapter 56 now. It wasn't Chapter 56 then. And so there was this major overhaul of the city's land use ordinance between 2004 and actually like 2010, early 2010s. And one of them was the parking ordinance. And so to be able to inform the parking ordinance, which if you look in, it's Chapter 56, Article 11, it is probably one of the most complicated, convoluted parking ordinances in this area of Maine. There's 3 different districts for downtown parking. They are all identified geographically with what their needs are, but it was informed by that 2008 study, as well as focus groups with the downtown businesses at that time. But yes, the short answer is it was conducted to be able to inform the ordinance changes to the land use ordinance at that time. And so the land use ordinances were approved in the early 2010s, and there has been no major overhaul because we have not had a comp plan process since 2004. And so you're going through a comp plan process now. Again, there's going to be a call for a lot of ordinance changes, not just for Chapter 56, which is the land use ordinance, but lots of different regulations, permitting throughout the city. And I believe the council is going to get a draft, and there will be a draft posted of it coming here in November, December. So, yeah, you're on the steering committee. So people will see that, but parking, again, is going to be something that will be looked at through, well, it's a recommendation of the comprehensive plan to review parking again. There's been a lot of changes just like nationally, focusing in on parking, trying to reduce the amount of parking requirements so that you don't have as much impervious surface, but there's a balance there. As the police know, like, you don't want people just kind of willy-nilly parking on the streets either, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jana.
Thank you all. We'll be in touch. Good.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Sorry I had to go, that's why I had to start.